The coffee machine hisses into the quiet of the apartment as I stand there, hands still damp from washing a mug I've washed 1,000 times before. The morning light bleeds through the blinds in thin, pale stripes, cutting across the tile with the precision of a math problem I once solved and then forgot how to solve. The fridge hums. The kettle hums. The clock on the stove ticks with a stubborn patience, like someone waiting for the exact moment to tell you you've been wrong about everything you've believed since waking up. The routine is flawless, predictable, almost ceremonial, until the moment arrives when I realize I've been pretending the ritual is life. The realization isn't loud. It doesn't strike with fanfare. It slides in, soft as the first breath you take after a nightmare, and stays there, in the corner of the kitchen, where sunlight lands on the counter and refuses to warm me. I stand at the counter and watch the cup fill, see the dark brew swirl and settle. A small black planet that I could orbit for a lifetime without ever leaving. The house feels asleep, even though I'm the one breathing. In the reflection of the window, I catch sight of myself, not the version I tell people I am, but something thinner, more exacting, the measure of all the compromises I've accepted without protest. The ordinary routine, doing dishes, making coffee, checking the weather app, greeting the day with an almost polite resignation. This is the moment that unsettles me, because it feels like a photo you've seen 100 times, except you're realizing you've been standing in the frame, pretending to be invisible. The moment isn't dramatic. It doesn't shout. It sits in the back of my throat, a dull ache that tastes like stale coffee and rain on metal. It's quiet enough to hear the clock edges, the soft creak of the floorboards as if the apartment itself is listening, weighing the life I'm living against some other life I'm not sure I want but I can't quite imagine letting go of. And in that quiet I understand. This ordinary routine, this is the shape of my life. I can't tell you the precise sentence that flips the switch, because there isn't a sentence that does it. There is a sensation, a slow uncoiling of certainty that something I've treated as a simple, acceptable default is, in fact, the backbone of a life I've never tested. The kitchen is bright with morning light. The sink reflects the ceiling, a pale mirror, and I hover near the edge of the space between action and thought, the moment where you realize your skin has grown so used to a temperature it no longer notices it. The tap leaves a coppery smell in the air, a scent I've learned to associate with the days I've endured rather than enjoyed. The coffee drinks a thin circle on the surface, then sinks, and with that, the sense that time isn't stretching as much as quietly slipping through. I ask myself what would happen if I didn't drink the coffee, if I stood there and let the day begin around me without a single small ritual to anchor it. The thought lands like a feather against glass, compelling, absurd, dangerous in its simplicity. The room is small. The ceiling is too low for grand revelations. There's a plate on the counter that's not mine, a reminder of people and moments I've allowed to pass through, people I've swallowed into a life that isn't mine alone. The light settles on the edge of a mug and refuses to move, as if to insist that the present moment is enough to hold a man's attention forever. Every morning I go through the motions as if they were steps on a staircase to a place I once believed existed beyond the horizon. There was a time when I pictured myself moving toward something large and bright, a life of purpose, of meaning, of deserved happiness, as if happiness were a currency to be earned and then spent with friends at long tables and in rooms full of laughter. I'd believed work would be a forge, and by that heat I would become someone with a future visible in the eyes of the people I loved. But the thoughts arrive uninvited and stay too long, like a guest who claims a chair and forgets to leave. The moment is not a loud verdict. It's a whisper that survives the day's first noise. It's the way my shoulders sit a notch lower when I stand upright after brushing teeth and surveying the bathroom mirror. It's the way the morning light makes the grain of the wood in the hallway floor appear more real than the promises I gave myself last night. Promises that felt urgent then but vanish by the time I reach the bus stop, by the time the coffee cools enough to taste like a bargaining chip. Maybe it's the sound of the radiator kicking in and out, the machine that keeps the apartment at a constant, tolerable temperature, like a heartbeat that's learned to hide fear behind the certainty of its own rhythm. Or perhaps it's the memory that arrives without invitation. A memory of a friend who told me once, during a late-night walk, that adulthood would feel like a legal agreement you sign with a pen you never want to pick up again, a line you cross and realize you've crossed many times before but never admitted to crossing with your own voice. The memory doesn't scold me. It simply sits there, nodding in the dim streetlight of a long-ago conversation, and I hear its verdict without a verdict ever being spoken. That the life I want, the life I imagine, and the life I live are not the same. The realization isn't a thunderclap. It's a hinge creaking open, slowly, noiselessly, in a way that makes you look at the door you've always closed and realize you've been standing on the wrong side of it. The door is not heavy. It's not barred. It's just a doorway, and I have become a man who moves through doorways without noticing new rooms. The moment feels like a soft landing after a long fall, the kind you don't tell anyone about because it would sound silly if you mention it aloud, the kind you measure in breaths taken in the minutes after the house wakes up, but before you speak to anyone, before you send a message to anyone and pretend you're still the same person who wrote those messages months ago. In this moment, I am aware of two versions of myself. The one who speaks to people with a carefully curated voice, and the one who stands in the kitchen with the coffee ring on the counter and asks the room if it is enough to be alive in a way that doesn't require courage to be honest about. The question is not, what should I do? The question is, what am I already doing that I'm not letting myself call life? And that is where the disquiet deepens, the sense that the difference between what I am and what I could be is not a gulf created by a lack of opportunity, but a gulf created by the daily, almost invisible choreography of choosing safety, choosing predictability, choosing to keep the definition of myself small enough to fit into an ordinary morning. I was 23 when the first maps of the future started to unfold in my brain, the way an atlas opens to reveal continents you've never seen and never will see, and yet somehow imagine as a backdrop to your own search for meaning. I believed that adulthood would feel like a long, clean line. Adolescence behind, ambitions in front, the day-to-day peppered with small, satisfying milestones. I pictured adult life as a steady ascent, not a staircase that circles back on itself, not a room you enter with the sense that you've left before and have never quite found your way out of again. There were stories whispered in the evenings when the lights in the apartment complex were just dim enough to cast soft shadows on the floor. My friends and I spoke of the future as if it were a party that would begin when we reached the right age. We spoke in the present tense about what we would do, whom we would become, which promises we would keep to ourselves. The words carried a lightness, a buoyancy that felt earned even as we admitted we hadn't yet done anything to earn it. The optimism felt like a resource, a well that would refill itself with every small achievement. A promotion here, a grant there, a debt paid on time, a note of gratitude from a supervisor, a signature on a contract that would be the passport to the life we'd imagined. But optimism has a soft underbelly. It blurs the edges of discomfort into something less threatening, a kind of makeup for the fear that, if left uncovered, would reveal the truth, that the life we imagined requires a kind of risk we are not prepared to take. I wanted to believe in the dream of adulthood because it felt like a license to belong, to be more than the person who is merely surviving a daily routine. I'd spent years collecting degrees of certainty, accumulating little proofs that I was on the right track to a life that would feel like a story told with permission, a life that would read well in a resume and sound good in a confidencier.